Welcome to Every Child Belongs. I'm Kim Botto, an adoptive mom, grandma, an advocate for kids and teens with disabilities, as well as a longtime leader of kids in student ministries. In this show, we explore how we can create spaces where every child feels heard and valued, whether neurodivergent, differently abled, or they've experienced trauma. Every child belongs. We'll hear from educators, parents, professionals, and more, finding practical ideas that help build a compassionate and supportive world for every child. Let's get started. Today, we have Chris Heslip on. Chris is a dad. Chris has, oh my gosh, how many startups? Like 15 startups?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, lots of startups. PushPay being one of them, which a lot of us in churches know because it's an online giving platform. Currently, you are CEO of Amazing Life and a couple other companies that you can talk about. And you recently acquired Orange, which many people in the children's ministry circles are familiar with that. And you live in Dallas, but as soon as you hear Chris talk, you're going to go, you're not from Dallas. So Chris, tell us, what else do you want us to know about you?
I have been married coming up on 20 years,
Congrats.
and I have three wonderful children, and I feel like I'm living the dream. I get to serve churches, making technology and media, and I mean, this is my dream job. So I love getting to do this and meet amazing people like you, Kim, who are doing incredible things to serve the church. But I love it. I think this is, if you woke up and you said you could design a dream life, this is what I would choose to do.
Well, so tell me, because you have been very successful with the businesses you had. Why did you decide to do this? And explain to people what this is, like what the purpose of Amazing Life is and what you're doing there.
Yeah, I'm all in right now on, Amazing Life, which, started a couple of years ago. We got a chance to partner with Tyler and Connie. And as you mentioned, with PushPay, things were reasonably successful. And so my heart was always, how do we serve and resource the church using the world's best technology and media? That's what I feel specifically led to do. And so when Tyler and Connie called me and said, hey, we have this idea for a brand new curriculum product, and it's really about leveraging technology and the best way to deliver the content, and then how do we make a curriculum that's kind of media first, because most of the curriculums that have been around were started 10, 20, 30 years ago. And so we said, how can we leverage media to keep things interesting, engage kids with their attention span, and then write the curriculum around the media rather than the other way around. And so we kind of, they started that, and I got a chance to partner with them and help fund some of it. And then at the end of last year, we met the board of Orange, and obviously they were looking for someone to take that on and lead it into the next season. And so it just made a lot of sense to partner, to bring the team and the infrastructure and the people that we had into the Orange ecosystem, and to leverage a lot of what made Orange really special in the first place, the idea of partnering with parents to help partner in kids' spiritual formation. I mean, that concept was revolutionary in kids ministry 10, 20 years ago, and yet I still think it's as relevant today as it ever has been.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned Tyler and Connie. That's Tyler and Connie Bates.
Yes.
Who are on staff at Amazing Life. And I met you through our mutual friend, Tyler.
Yes.
And when we met, Amazing Life had approached me about partnering with you guys to help equip churches to welcome every kid and provide an environment for them to participate, come to know who Jesus is, and grow in their faith. And during that conversation, I could sense your passion. I mean, you were very, very passionate. And I kept saying, so tell me more about yourself. So tell me, because I kept thinking there is something behind your passion. I know you love Jesus. I know you care about all kids. So will you tell us more about your family and where that fire comes from in creating a place for every kid?
Absolutely. Well, the slightly long version, and I don't even know if I shared this with you, but our first son was born in New Zealand, and we moved to Seattle. And a few years ago, he was diagnosed with ADHD, my older son.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I fought that for a long time. You try to, in the church world, you're like, hey, let's just ignore that and pray it away. And so ironically, we went to New Zealand on a trip in 2020. We were quarantined in a hotel room, and my wife said, hey, would you sit with our older son, Micah, and do some maths, homework? And we're sitting there with him, And I could ask him and I could say, what is 12 plus 12? And he'd be like, 24. And sitting here looking at this piece of paper, he could not, it would take him half an hour,
Mm-hmm.
and he could not get the thought from his head onto the piece of paper. And I was like, oh, like this is not just some made up thing. Like, this is a real learning challenge that our oldest son had. And we not fought each other, but fought the resistance to try not to get him on medication because, Adderall and all of that. And eventually, after that experience, I was like, we really need to find something to help him to be able to learn in a classroom, because it was, in that case, there was nothing that he could have done. It wasn't that he was being naughty or disobedient. He just literally couldn't, as you say, his mind doesn't work the same as other kids. And he's a chatterbox. He loves to talk. So this was our oldest son. And when our second son was born, he was about 2.5 years old, and he was nonverbal. And we were like, the experience and the difference from our oldest son to our second son was night and day. And we were like, what is wrong with CJ? Like, this is so strange, because our older son he just talks so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't know about autism at the time. We were in Seattle. Seattle's one of the biggest cities in America, in North America, for autism and studies. And so we started taking him to doctors, and through a long, journey, eventually he got diagnosed with reasonably severe autism at that time. And I have to tell you, it's heartbreaking, as a parent, to have a child. All you want for your kids is, are they going to live a normal life? Are they going to be able to follow Jesus? Are they going to be able to get married? And to kind of have those hopes feel like they have evaporated with a child who's 2.5 years old. They didn't choose this.
Right.
He didn't. And so you have this like extreme grief almost that
Yes.
you go through as a parent
Yes.
to kind of process what it means to have a child who potentially is the doctors told us he probably will never have a job, because if he's non-verbal, then how can you have a job? And I worked with a lot of engineers at PushPay, programmers, and a lot of them are on the spectrum in some way, and people would encourage me and say, no, like, there's potential, like kids can do different things that are going to put them in a way to kind of but at the same time, you're like, how can you have a marriage and a relationship? And so as a parent, you're just heartbroken
Right.
at the thought of that. And so we prayed a lot about what should we do and how should we approach it. And at 2.5 years old, he started 40 hours a week of in-home therapy, which, like, we work 40 hours a week at the 9 to 5 at the office, and he was having that
It's a
much.
full-time job.
And for people who aren't familiar with autism, like, literally teaching, this is a boy, this is a girl, this person is happy, this person is sad. The journey and the work that has to happen for kids to things that we just take so much for granted. And CJ had to work so hard to learn those patterns that everyone else just inherently knows. And so the thing that just kind of got me so convicted about this when we started this journey with Orange was, Jesus talks all about leaving the 99 and going after the one. And in the church, the modern church, we think about leaving the one to go after the 99 because it's about how many kids showed up and how many people in the auditorium, and
Mm-hmm.
mega churches, this and that. We have it backwards. Jesus went after the one. And in this context specifically, how do we care? How do we create an environment for kids who are different? As you've taught me so much, just even in the short time we've been friends, about how do we tailor this environment and build an environment that those kids feel welcomed, they feel loved, they feel cared for. Yes, they're different. Yes, they have challenges, but the thing that got us so convicted was, where else should those kids want to go other than the church? Like, if they're not welcome at church, where else are they welcome? Because we should be the most loving organization on the planet, and yet that's not what we're known for. And so that's what got us so passionate about partnering with you to build resources to be able to serve churches, to ensure that they're creating that environment for every child who's coming on a Sunday morning to experience that love in that environment.
There's a couple of things you said. One, I think you sharing that you and your wife grieved I mean, when we're faced with something that looks different than what we anticipated, it's okay to take a moment and grieve. And you guys still very much love CJ, want the best for him, and you can still grieve what you're in the moment. And then another thing, you talking about, creating a place for every kid and running after the one. One of the things when I met you, I'm like, oh, he's like the real deal. Like he's not just blowing smoke. Like he really, really cares about this, and not just for CJ, but for all kinds of kids who feel different. Chris, when I talk to other ministry leaders, especially who have the influence and potential to influence churches like you do, I think it's because they're not in proximity to kids who are different. They're kind of like, oh, we'll do a little box at the end of the curriculum that says, if a kid is having trouble settling down, here, do this. How do we help them understand how important this is? I mean, Jesus said, let the little children come to me. And he didn't say the ones who can stand in line in an orderly fashion and complete do their math on paper instead of do it orally. So how do we help others understand the importance of this?
I mean, I think first of all, I'm guilty of that. When it came to Micah's ADHD, my oldest son, I didn't believe it. You're like, oh, like, yeah, it sounds so nice. And then when I sat with him for half an hour and he literally couldn't get the thoughts from his head to the piece of paper,
Mm-hmm.
I started experiencing it for myself and understanding that this is not, we think in today's, we just think that's some kind of made up thing, autism or ADHD. We don't treat it with the seriousness that we should, because we don't have the proximity to children who are like that. And if you're fortunate enough to have normal children, I should say, then you don't see the challenge that parents of those children, how difficult just even getting to church on a Sunday morning is. Like it's, some of those early times with CJ, it was, it's hard to even think about. Like he would sometimes just bang his head on the concrete floor. Like, he would, and so just to get to church is a success sometimes for parents with kids who struggle with these kinds of things. And we kind of judge people when they show up and they, look half tired, or they whatever. Like we just have these preconceptions of like, well, they're just like us, but they're not. They face so much difficulty just getting there on a Sunday morning. And I think if you haven't experienced that, it's really hard to understand the price that someone has paid just to walk in the front door of your building, and to then be greeted with, sorry, we don't want your son here, which happened to us multiple times at churches in Seattle. We would go, I'm sorry, we don't know what to do with your son. Our volunteers aren't equipped and you're like, it was a battle for us just to get here. I love Jesus, but if I didn't love Jesus, I don't know how I would deal with, felt like being rejected by the church.
Right.
And I think that difficulty in a perfect world is like, how can volunteers, pastors get around some of those kids? Because the heart that they have, it will melt you if you can get in proximity to it. But I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a question for you, is how do you help create that environment for people that have never seen, kids who are dealing with those things? How do you help communicate the importance of creating that environment?
Well, I think you just said it. It's proximity, and it's a heart change. It's not just giving them 5 strategies. It's helping them understand. And that's why we do this podcast, because we want people to hear from parents like you. And I have heard you said you love Jesus. So you didn't give up on Jesus because, as I know you were told one time, oh, absolutely, you're welcome here. You and CJ can sit here in the lobby, which doesn't feel very welcoming to me. But I know your heart is also for the people who are just figuring out who Jesus is or don't know him at all. And when the church says that to them, well, that's Jesus. In their mind, that is Jesus saying, you don't belong here. So I think you guys are, I think you telling your story. So tell us what you learned, because, initially you said, you're looking to pray it away and others are looking to pray it away. And actually, I want to stop for a second there, because that is actually something that people, when they get a diagnosis that is interpreted as difficult, oh, Chris, in the church circles, we do have a tendency to say, I'm praying for a miracle. I'm praying that he will be typical, or What would you say to that? What might be a better way to respond when you tell somebody that your child's just been diagnosed with something?
Hmm. I think it depends where parents are on that process, because when you first hear it, it's grief. It's I tell my team disappointment is just unmet expectations, and so when you experience that, this unbelievable disappointment because they had expectations. Maybe they were right, maybe they weren't, but the point is now my expectations are now closed. The expectation gap is like, oh, I thought God had these plans for my son, and so you just have this extreme disappointment and grief that all of these expectations that I had that maybe I had never articulated are now potentially not going to come true. And so I think the challenge when you first get that is just like anyone getting a cancer diagnosis or anything, right? Is like being with people, sitting with them, having a meal with them. As a guy, it's like, guys just love showing up. You don't need to say anything, but just show up and be there for people, because it's a really not an easy process to go through, especially when there's nothing you can do about it because you feel so helpless as a parent. So I think that's the first thing. And then I think the second thing is, with autism, ADHD, there are practical things that we can do to care for those kids, help them, understand that. I tell my oldest son he has a superpower. I'm like, ADHD is a superpower. People always focus on the lack of focus and attention, but actually, ADHD means the way that I've
It's over
yes.
focus.
And
Yes.
if you find something like that, and I find when I started reading all the symptoms of ADHD, I'm like, oh, I check all of those. Like I have that. No one had ever told me that. The ability to be crazy focused on something that holds your attention is the flip side of the coin. And so the question is, how can we make environments that are going to stimulate kids appropriately to keep them interested? And or if they're not able to be in a main service, how do we create an environment where they can be loved and cared for in a way that they can process and learn about Jesus without feeling like they're different or being left out from the other kids? And I think that's what we think a lot about, because I experienced a lot of that. The one thing that the church that we started attending in Seattle did was, and just a really practical thing for churches, is having a buddy, so that when CJ showed up, there was a kid who was a year or two older than him, who every time he would go, CJ, welcome, we're so glad you're here. And this kid who's usually so emotionless would just be like, oh, like I'm
Mm-hmm.
so happy about it. And I think just it's something so small and yet so practical that can make an environment feel welcome for kids. And just memorizing his name, like just hearing
Yes.
someone saying, oh, CJ, you're welcome here. Those little practical things were so helpful to help him feel included.
I love that you're talking about a buddy being just a couple years older. A lot of churches will say, we don't have enough adults. I'm like, you don't need adults. You need mature uh, teenagers
Mm-hmm.
that can do it. Is CJ, is he 8 or 9 now? How old is he?
He just turned 10.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So when CJ got his diagnosis, and also your older kid with his diagnosis of ADHD, like by being the parent of a neurodivergent kids, what have you learned about the world,
Mm.
and what have you learned about the church?
Oh, wow. I think the world is not set up uh, to be helpful and kind to neurodivergent kids. It's The world is set up to say, if you fit in this 80% right in the middle, then the world is going to be very kind to you. But the second that you're two degrees this way or 2 degrees this way, everything becomes that much harder. Everything. Well, in fact, let me tell you a story. We were at Disney World, like 3 years ago, and we had a buggy because kids with autism, noise, that they have an extreme sensory, uh, you know, they hate the loud noises, right?
Right.
And so we're at Disney World, and we had bought this little cart for him to sit in, and we bought him some headphones to have while he's waiting in the line, because those lines at Disney World are like
Right.
crazy noisy and sensory overload. And we got to the entrance, and they said, "Oh, I'm sorry that you can't bring this little buggy thing in." And we said, well, look, I'm really, our son, he has autism, and we explained it to them, and they were like, oh, well, we have this specific way for you to be able to get a place in line without waiting in line, so that you can, like, you still have to wait, but you can kind of check in and then go wait, not in the lines of all the noises, and then when you come back at the right time, you can go straight to the front of the line. And so, here's Disney, a corporation that cares not about salvation, just cares about making money. And they had thought very intentionally about children and the experience that they were creating for children and kids with sensory disabilities where they can't deal with the sensory overload. They had made the specific experience for kids dealing with that. And I thought to myself, you know what? Like, that little thing made us like, forget all the other stuff about Disney. That little experience made us like fans for life,
Yes.
because they had been so intentional about the experience they were creating for kids like CJ, and it felt like they loved him as a corporation, for crying out loud. And yet we felt this, like, they care about us. And but that's the exception, not the rule. Anytime you go somewhere and there's a lot of noise, like going to the airport for kids with autism is a massive struggle, because it's like so much noise. You're waiting in a security line with TSA, and there's so many unknowns. You're taking stuff out of bags, and autistic kids struggle with a lack of structure, and it's just so hard. And so I think the point is, the world makes it so hard, and yet that one little experience, that one little Disney experience, made
Right.
us go, wow, like this is what great looks like, And I guess that's the thing, was how do we do that in the church? That one little experience of, like, how do we make it feel like, wow, I'm welcome here, and the church loves me, because they've thought carefully through what it means to be neurodivergent. And so it's just, I just thought about it now when you mentioned it, like that kind of little act of kindness meant so much to us. Even though we could never take our buggy into Disney World, they had thought to ask and create an environment for kids like that.
A little act of kindness. I think we make it too complicated. They showed you a little act of kindness, and now you are saying we are fans for life of Disney. How awesome would it be if people who had no clue who Jesus is and walked into our churches, and because of a little act of kindness, they became, and I think we can do it. So tell me about, so Chris, oh my gosh, you started so many companies. So you're very innovative. What innovations do you think we need in the church in order to provide spaces for every child?
That is a great question. I think when it comes to innovation, the thing we always think about is it's new and cutting edge and different. But really, the thing that I've tried to do in all of the companies is find something that's boring and basic and do it like exceedingly well. And I think it's kind of a little twist on the way that we think of innovation. And because we think of it as like it's AI and this new thing that's out here to kind of grasp for, but it's really not. Like, the goal is, um, Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, he had this great saying. He said, "Everyone who's trying to build a business focuses on all the things that are changing." And he said, instead of that, we focus on the things that should never change. Amazon's, so they boiled it down to three things. People want packages faster, they want a broader selection, and they want them cheaper. Like, no one woke up and said, I want things more expensive today. So as we think about building an a kids ministry like ours, or a church, or the folks that are watching, the thing that we should think about is, how do we find things that people want that are never going to change? Because all of this technology and AI and websites and all of, like, that's all going to change. But if we build and have foundations on things that are never going to change, then the benefit of that is, like, how do we do those things 10 times better than anyone else? And it's just those simple, basic things that are repeated to our teams and then executed 10 times better than the world, that's going to make a difference. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned, is like, how, so that's specifically, like, when you look at some of the best kids ministries in North America, they don't do anything different than anyone else. All they do different is they do the basics exceedingly well. And I watched this great documentary about Bill Belichick and Nick Saban, and they were talking about all of the biggest mistakes that they made in football. And the list they went through was just, the games they lost were all just, they didn't execute on the basics really well. And I think the struggle that we have in kids ministry is we make it hard to check kids in. We don't make people feel welcome when they walk in the front door. They don't know where to go. Is this safe for my kids? How do we communicate safety? Like, there's just all of those little things. If we could think through the perspective from the guest experience, we could make this an incredible experience. And it's not revolutionary. It's not innovation. It's not technology. It's just doing the basics so well that people feel like, wow, someone thought about this process and I feel cared for, even if it's the slightest, smallest things. I'm a student of churches. I love, visiting churches. I remember I went to Elevation Church for the first time, and I went to their main office, and I went to one of the campuses, and I was like, the smell of the campus is the same as and like, oh yeah, we put, perfume 8371 in the air conditioning system or whatever to ensure that across every single campus. The point is not whether you agree with that or not. The point is someone had thought about the fact that the smell of the campus should be the same as each of the campuses, so that when you walk in, you feel that sense of familiarity. And it's like, the fact someone at a church was thinking like that, I was like, this is awesome, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again,
Yes.
it's just a small little detail executed, with consistency.
Chris, I thought you were going to have some wild answers about innovation. And you're saying, I think again, it goes back to we're making it too complicated. As we continue today's episode, I wanted to let you know that if you're looking for more resources, strategies, and encouragement for making sure every child belongs, head over to our website at kimbotto.com. Sign up for the newsletter to receive exclusive content and insider info on future episodes. Don't miss out. Go to kimbotto.com and join today. For kids like your sons, what would be the boring and basic things that we could just do better to make it an environment where they feel comfortable and can have fun with their peers and their leaders, and
Yeah,
most importantly, know who Jesus is?
absolutely. So, I mean, we talked about the buddy system. I mean, that's just such a basic thing, but it starts with
Yep.
someone has to schedule that, someone has to train that, someone has to remember the name. So it's when you see something so basic like that, there's the systems behind the scenes that allow that to happen. There's actually the magical part, because the fact that when my son turned up the second week and the third week, that young kid who just a couple of years older than him was saying, CJ, welcome. Like, someone was really intentional with how they put that together to ensure that that actually happened. I think, one of the things you and I have talked a lot about is like kids with sensory challenges, being able to make them feel like, if they're able to, being in the group with all of the other kids. Because in a perfect world, no kid wants to not be with their friends, right? They want to feel like they're part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, sometimes that's not possible. And so having those additional sensory rooms where even if they can't be with their friends, they can still watch the same content. That little difference of making that room that's just that little bit quieter, the sensory adaptations and the curriculum and the media, ensuring that's put together in a way that kids can still experience that. Like, that's just a tiny little thing. One of the things that I'm thinking a lot about these days is like the schedule for how churches run curriculum. Like,
Mm-hmm.
for the longest time, it was like we have large group and we have small group, and you know, I think I talked to a church that had multiple kind of sessions between, it was large group, small group, large group, small group, and the lady I was speaking with explained to me the reason they do that is because sometimes when you break off and you have the small group environment, kids just never quite settle. And so if they never settle and you've got 20 minutes and the kid is just not, the kids are not quite in the right, headspace about it. But if it's 10 minutes and then we go back to the large group again and, hey, we're going to have another video, we're going to have a song, and then we're going to have another small group, you get two chances at it. And so they were explaining to me how, so I'm thinking a lot about that and learning a lot about this space because I'm, obviously was from the giving side, but just thinking a lot about those little things that is that better for kids today who have shorter attention spans to be able to have more a faster moving kind of schedule for how we plan content than, here's a 20-minute small group activity. And if that doesn't go well, it's, that one kid can be distracting the other kids versus, hey, it's a 10-minute activity and then we can have multiple attempts at that, which seemed to be working quite well for that church. So there's a lot of things like that that kind of start with questioning the assumptions as much as you're able to of why do we do things this way, and just because we always have done it is not always the right answer.
Right. But you're taking the basic and boring structure of how we do it on Sunday mornings and making minor little tweaks to make it excellent, not just for typical kids, but for all kids.
Absolutely. And I think one thing which, obviously you and I have partnered on is putting together a course to train volunteers, staff, and, older kids to be able to understand. Because, when we have kids who are neurodivergent or have disabilities, the first thing that we can honor them with is at least taking the time to understand what it is that they need from us.
Mm-hmm.
And it costs nothing. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to do it. You just have to spend a little time to say, here's what ADHD is, and here's what autism is, and this is what they need from us. Like, if you could go Google for 2 hours and you could show that empathy to the child to say, I care enough about you. I care enough about the environment that we're creating to have done some work to understand, what the challenges are that you're facing. And that little thing right there goes such a distance to showing that love and attention and being able to create an environment that's great for them and for the other kids.
Right.
And it costs nothing, just a little bit of our time, attention, and planning, and that's executing the basics really well.
Yeah. And that's instead of requiring them to teach us, we become a student of who they are.
Exactly. And again, that's the arrogance I had is like, well, I can change my son with ADHD.
Yeah.
I can, that's not a real thing, but when you say, no, like when I sat with him and he literally couldn't get the answer from his brain to the piece of paper in half an hour, I'm like, oh no, this is like, and I think we're just like, well, this kid is naughty. This kid is acting up. This kid,
Right.
it's like, but we haven't taken the time to understand them. We're just putting our judgment and our mindset and our approach onto them when we haven't said, hey, we can actually care for you. We can, we sometimes it's just as simple as taking a kid off to the side and having, hey, is everything okay? Like, how are you doing? And instead of like, this kid is acting out because they're naughty, which is our default assumption, right?
Right. Right.
Can we just, can we have, I heard a story the other day, Kim, of a kids pastor who had a very disruptive boy in the class. And so the first time, this kid was like punching and kicking other kids and being extremely disruptive. And she said, hey, like, is everything okay? And he said, look, if you're in this environment, like, here's the rules that we have to have. Now, listen, if you're feeling this way, just come and have a conversation with me. It's okay. Let's just come and have a conversation with me rather than doing these other behaviors. And the young boy said, yes, I agree. And then, sure enough, a few weeks later, the young boy was acting out again. He said, hey, like we had this deal that, if things aren't okay, we can have this conversation. And the boy, it turned out, was going through a lot of change at home, and parents were not in a good spot.
Mm-hmm.
And so the assumption was like, oh, this kid is acting out because they're naughty, when it's like, no, there's all of these things happening in their home life. And the fact that they just showed up to church was enough.
Right.
And so through that, the kids pastor was able to, to kind of connect with the young boy and say, hey, like, we're here, we're praying for you, we're caring for you. Like, it's that little, like, hey, can we lead with empathy?
Can we please?
And then rather than just like, you're naughty, we don't want you in our environment, like, you're disrupting all of that. And also, Kim, what that is modeling for the other kids, right? Of like, hey, we're modeling for them. Like, these kids are different. So let's have that conversation in a way that cares for them without putting judgment onto them, because that's the last thing they need.
Yes. Every kid has a story, and they don't come in telling us, hey, just so you know, this is what's happening at my house right now. They tell us by flipping tables and punching other kids.
Right.
Chris, the startup business culture seems to be more of a lifestyle than a job. So how do you balance the tension of leading a startup, but then also being a husband, a dad, a friend?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think first of all, we all struggle with the word balance and trying to keep everything balanced. And when you start with a workplace environment and then you work backwards to fit your family around it, you're always going to lose. Your family's always going to come second. And so from the earliest days, of corporate working in corporate environments, I always said, no, there's some things I won't compromise on. And it's amazing when you say, this is something I will never compromise on. I'll never work on Sunday. I will never, you know, skip Wednesday nights, date night with my wife. It's amazing how the world works around those. Intolerance is the wrong word, but like the inflexibility. And I think that people are afraid to say no because, like, well, I need this job and I need this money. But I think that it's incredible once you say, this is a non negotiable. Like, I'm not compromising on these things that are really important, whatever the rhythms and routines are that people have set. The world, I tell my team, don't call me on Wednesday night. It's date night. I'm not going to pick up. I don't care if the building is burning to the ground. You can deal with it, and I'll come on Thursday morning and help, hose the fire down. And I think it's just amazing how many people are like won't set those kind of really firm in stone schedules that force people to work around them. So I think that's one thing. The second one is just like we talked about a little bit, having the regular routines of my kids and the donuts and things like that. I was telling my team, I walk in the door at 6 o'clock, I put my phone in a drawer, and I don't look at it again for 2 hours or 2.5 hours. I think as a father, one of the things people always get upset about is dads always on their phone when they should be with their kids. Now, look, I'm not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be the first to tell you. But for that couple of hour period of time, I'm not on my phone. I'm spending time having dinner. And I think it's amazing when you just make those moments like that, just a couple of hours in the day where you're not looking at your phone, how far that goes from the relationship with my wife and my family. And then, yes, you work hard, you work long hours, but those moments of not compromising are just really important.
Good answer. Chris, many people talk about hearing God in decision making. For you, what does spiritual discernment into high stakes business decisions look like without using it as an excuse to avoid hard analysis and feedback?
Well, I think so much in the faith world is either I feel this or I believe this or there's this evidence. And I think we have to start with an understanding that both can be true. We're not denying the facts by faith and we're not 100% going on belief. It's got to be, both can be true. And I think people want to deny reality sometimes when we should be saying no, like there's hard things that we have to deal with as believers. And so I think specifically in the church world, saying no, we have to be able to understand that both of these things can be true at the same time. And one of the other things I believe, which might be extremely contrary for a lot of folks in the church world, is the number one way to hear from God is to be doing something. I mean, why is it that the way that when Jesus called people, he called business people? Why? Because they were doing something. And I think so much of it was like, be still and know that I am God. Like, absolutely, that's true. But I think that God speaks to you in the middle of action. Like one of my mentors, he said, you never receive anything from God passively.
Mm.
Like you have to be doing something. C.S. Lewis says when Jesus returns, he should be finding us serving him faithfully when he comes back. Meaning like we're doing something. And I think as church leaders, what we have to say is like we should be focused on doing. So much of the world we live in is about believing and these, but it's like no, like our belief should turn into action because you can't show people you love them by just saying that. You have to do it through, Jesus said, hey, when you've given someone water, when you've fed someone, when you've clothed someone, you've done it to the least of these, you've done it for me. What is it? That's doing stuff. And we just in the church world want to say, well, that's not real. It's not a works-based faith. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's saying, no, like we have to work out our faith in fear and trembling. We have to step it out. And so I think so much of it's about hearing God in the process of doing something.
I grew up Baptist, so I have such an which probably makes me more of a doer than I should be. But people who would just sit on their rear ends and say, I'm praying about it. I'm waiting for a word for the Lord. And I go, well, scripture says, I think that's a word from the Lord. So let's get off your butt and let's go do something. But that was great. That was great, Chris. Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the work that you're doing. I appreciate so much your vulnerability and sharing your family story. Thank you for being willing to do that. I know Amazing Life is doing all kinds of amazing things. So, what would you like our listeners to know about?
Well, Kim, you and I got to partner together to make an incredible course called Every Child. And, one of the first things that Tyler and I wanted to do when we got a chance to partner with Orange was to say, we have to lead. Like, this is not just something that we say is important. We have to back that up with what we're doing. And so Kim has come and put together this incredible course, and it's going to help train you practically on how to create a kids ministry that is going to care for every child,
Yes.
neurodivergent kids, kids dealing with all kinds of disabilities. And I love it because it's incredibly practical. And you put, you know, I like to say it's like 20 years of work wrapped up in 6 hours of content that's going to help kids pastors do it. And so whether you're an Orange subscriber, whether you're not an Orange subscriber, it's going to be completely free for everyone. And, Kim, you put such a huge amount of work into that. And so it's our privilege to be able to, serve the body of Christ through, this incredible organization called Orange to be able to provide that to everyone. And so it's our privilege to be able to do that because this is our heart, is to help churches serve every child. And so, thank you for serving and doing what you're doing to help raise awareness that every child matters, not just normal kids who fit in this little band here, but every child is important to Jesus.
Such, such an honor to partner with you guys. And you, Amazing Life, invested heavily in this. There were a whole bunch of people in that room when that course was being filmed. And I want everybody to, it's free. Amazing Life is giving it away for free. Amazing Life and Chris believes so much that the church has got to be equipped to welcome every kid, that you're pouring, I can't even imagine how much money you've poured in getting these videos edited and all that. You're pouring financial resources in it with no expectation in return other than churches. Please, please use this resource so you can be a safe place for kids like CJ and a safe place for my grandsons. And thank you so much, Chris. It's been fun to be with you. And we always end with just some rapid fire questions. So you ready for that?
Ray.
Okay. You've told us you're from New Zealand, not from Texas. You live in Texas now. What's the biggest difference between New Zealand and the US?
So New Zealand is a beautiful country. It's a small island. Like if you go to Hawaii, it's like living on a small island, and people are so content there. Everyone is like they love their life. They're not worried about climbing a ladder. People are, and coming to the States, everyone's trying to get a better car and a bigger house and all of this, and it's like there's something to be said for like the contentness of people living in a place like that. So it's just such a difference to come here, and everyone's always trying to figure out how to get to the next rung on the ladder, which, is crazy in a lot of ways. Like 20 years from now, who remembers whether you got a nicer car or not?
Nobody. Nobody remembers, Chris. Nobody remembers. If you could only eat one food, what would you eat?
I'm a steak guy. Just give me the steak, any kind of steak, and I'm a happy man.
Good to know. What's your favorite family tradition?
Oh, okay. So for all the dads out there, one of the things that I heard somewhere was the thing that your kids are going to remember is those, like we're talking about doing the basics well, those small things done repeatedly. So I have a thing I do every Saturday with my boys where I take them to get donuts. And so every Saturday, I take my two boys and we get donuts and hang out for an hour. And it's just that little thing, costs you next to nothing, and spending an hour with them, and it's so fun. I've got pictures of them when they're young boys eating Krispy Kreme donuts, and they love it.
Oh, and you know what, Chris? I bet that when they're no longer living in your house, they're going to be having some weekly tradition, and it might be donuts with their kids because they will. They will, because you have instilled in them the importance of that. What's one thing you wish every kids ministry volunteer understood about CJ and kids like him?
Oh, I hope this doesn't come across too philosophical, but I think that we in the Western world we're so driven by numbers, and we love to tell everyone how many kids we had, and we count them, and we report that to the senior pastor and all of that. And I think that look, nothing wrong with numbers, but it's I'll say it's half the story. It's not even half the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
The the thing about it is, how do we create an environment that kids want to come to? And I love this quote by Mother Teresa. She said, "God doesn't call us to success; He calls us to obedience."
Mm.
And I think
Yeah.
that, when it comes to creating an environment that's safe for every child to be a part of, the problem is making a special environment for that one kid. That one time I had that one experience with Disney, I'm talking about here on this podcast, about
Yes.
how do you measure that in numbers and shareholder returns and number of people in your kids' ministry? You can't. So we just over index on numbers. And I wish that we would say, no, like, what I'm most proud of is, yes, there was all these kids in my ministry this weekend, but I went away from the 99 after this one over here. And yes, they took up a lot of my time, but you know what? This kid is important to Jesus.
Yes.
And, we're doing this because this is important. And
Yes.
that's why no one got into kids ministry because they wanted 50 kids or 100 kids in their class. They went into kids because they wanted to reach the one.
You're right.
And yet we forget that 3 years into it.
We do. Okay, Chris, last question. Finish this thought. Every child.
Every child should know the love of Jesus. I mean, as you said, Jesus asked the kids to come to him, and we try to make it so incredibly difficult for kids to come to know Jesus. And I think that the thing that keeps me awake at night and gets me up in the morning is thinking about how can I get kids whose parents have never set foot in a church to come to church. And I think about this all day, every single day. What if we could do a partnership with Bear Grylls, and we could have him to make a VBS, and all of these kids would be like, I want to go. I don't know anything about Jesus, but I want to go because Bear Grylls is there. And then this was awesome. The content was so great. The people were so friendly. Tell me a little more about who this Jesus guy is. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is like, everyone in business thinks about how do I get more of the pie. My only goal that I think about night and day is how to grow the pie.
Mm.
How do we make it so that, you know, new families, new kids are coming to church for the first time, and through that are getting an opportunity to hear about Jesus. And that's the thing that keeps me up at night, thinking through like what would it take for that to be true. And you can't do that if you're only caring for typical kids, and if you don't have a plan for neurodivergent kids, like it's just not going to work. So it has to be, how do we reach every child, which is the goal. And that requires us to do a lot of work to build environments that are safe and friendly and encouraging and welcoming for every child. So that's what I think about night and day.
That's a great goal, and I think that's consistent with what Jesus told us to do with the Great Commission. So, Chris, thank you so much. If people are going, oh, I'm interested in the stuff you're talking about, how might people get access to these resources?
Absolutely. We will post the link in the show note down here, up here, somewhere like this. And
Mm-hmm.
in the description, there'll be a link to the Every Child course, Kim, that you have put together. And we will, again, completely free. So click on the link and go ahead and get it. And I think the one thing, we've managed to do courses for quite some time. The thing I would encourage you to do is not just to watch the content, because I think that's kind of maybe half of the battle. The single best thing you can do is arrange a time to go through it with other folks in your ministry, because watching content and doing nothing about it does nothing. But
Right.
one of the things I love to do with my teams is we will read books together, because I'm like, hey, I didn't say all these ideas. Patrick Lencioni did, and you should. So it's like, hey, if you go through the course and you can arrange times to go through, 45 minutes times 6 or 7 weeks with your team, that's how you're going to create a culture that allows every child to feel welcome. And so if there's a way for you to do that, to structure that, to create that environment in your ministry, that's what's going to lead to creating that culture, rather than just one person watching it and learning some information that doesn't change anything.
Yeah, we did not create it to dispense information. We created to change people's hearts and thereby change the lives of all kinds of kids and their families. So thank you, Chris. It's been so fun to get to know you and now to call you my friend. And I look forward to all the amazing resources that Amazing Life is creating. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today on Every Child Belongs. If you found today's episode helpful, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. And don't forget to share this with a friend who might need to hear it. Together, we can create a world where every child belongs.